I need you to picture something for me. It's a Tuesday morning, February 14th, Valentine's Day. I'm standing in my kitchen in Charlotte, North Carolina, holding a card I bought 3 days earlier. It has a red envelope. I'd written his name on it in my neatest handwriting, Daniel. The eggs are on the stove. Coffee is fresh. I'm wearing the blue robe he got me for Christmas. And then I hear his phone buzz on the counter. I wasn't going to look. I never looked at his phone. In 14 years of marriage, I never once did that. But something, I don't know what, made me pick it up. One message. That's all it took. Last night was everything. I can't stop thinking about you, KK. My sister's name is Karen. I put the phone down. I turned off the eggs. I sat down on the kitchen floor in my blue robe, and I didn't move for 47 minutes. And here's what I want you to know before I tell you this whole story. 2 years after that morning, I watched Daniel lose everything. His job. His reputation. His new relationship. All of it. Gone. But I'll get to that. First, let me take you back to where this really started. My name is Rachel. Rachel Marie Holloway. I grew up in a small town called Mooresville, North Carolina. Population 54,000. Kind of place where everybody knows your last name and your mama's maiden name too. I met Daniel James Holloway when I was 24 years old at a 4th of July cookout at my cousin's house. He had dark hair, a loud laugh, and he brought homemade potato salad that honestly was the best thing I'd ever tasted. I know. The potato salad should not have been the sign. But when a man shows up to a cookout with homemade food, you think this one is different. We dated for 2 years. Got married on June 3, 2007 at First Baptist Church on Main Street. 112 guests. White roses. My mama cried through the whole ceremony. For 14 years I thought we were solid. We had a 3-bedroom house on Willow Creek Drive. I worked as an office manager at a dental practice on Providence Road. Daniel was in sales, medical equipment. He traveled sometimes. 3-4 days a week. We didn't have children. That was a pain I carried quietly. We tried for 6 years. Lost 2 pregnancies. After the second one, something between us got quieter. Softer. But I told myself we're still together. That's what matters. My sister Karen was 4 years younger than me. 38 to my 42. She was the pretty one. That's what people always said, not meanly, just as a fact, the way you'd say the sky is blue. Karen had mom's cheekbones and dad's confidence. She'd been divorced once, no kids, lived in an apartment 20 minutes from our house. She came to Sunday dinner almost every week. She sat at my table. She ate my food. She laughed at Daniel's jokes a little too long. And I never saw it. Not once. Until that Valentine's Day morning when I was sitting on my kitchen floor in a blue robe with cold eggs on the stove. I sat on that kitchen floor for 47 minutes. I know because when I finally stood up, I looked at the microwave clock. It said 8:54 a.m. I had sat down at 8:07. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I thought I would cry. But I didn't. I just sat there on the cold tile in my blue robe, staring at the cabinet under the sink, thinking about the most random things. I thought about the trip Daniel and I took to Gatlinburg, Tennessee in 2019. How he held my hand on the hiking trail and said, "Rachel, I would choose you every single time." I thought about last Thanksgiving. Karen sitting next to Daniel at the dinner table. How she touched his arm when she laughed. I had noticed it for 1 second and then told myself I was being ridiculous. I thought about the way he'd been distant since October. Coming home late. Saying he was tired. Turning away from me in bed. 4 months. This had been going on for at least 4 months. I got up off the floor. I walked to the bedroom. Daniel was still asleep. He was on his back, one arm over his eyes, breathing slow and easy like a man with absolutely nothing on his conscience. I stood in the doorway for a long time just looking at him. Then I walked to his side of the closet. I pushed past his work shirts, and behind his gray suit jacket, the one he wore to my father's funeral 2 years ago, I found a shoebox. Inside that shoebox were 3 things: a hotel receipt, the Marriott on Tryon Street, downtown Charlotte, October 14th, one night, $189, a birthday card, pink envelope, Karen's handwriting, said, "To the man who makes everything better. I'm so glad we stopped pretending." And a photograph. A photograph of the 2 of them, sitting at a restaurant I didn't recognize, laughing, his hand on hers on the table. I put everything back exactly how I found it. I put the shoebox behind the gray suit jacket. I walked to the bathroom. I washed my face. I brushed my hair. And then I did something that surprised even me. I went back to the kitchen. I made fresh eggs. I poured 2 cups of coffee. And when Daniel walked out at 9:15 in his t-shirt and sweatpants, I handed him his mug and I smiled. 'Cause I had decided something on that kitchen floor. I was not going to react. I was going to plan. That morning changed me in a way I still can't fully explain. Something inside me went very quiet, very still. Like a lake right before a storm, completely flat on top, but underneath everything was moving. I smiled at Daniel over breakfast. I asked him how he slept. He said fine. He asked me what I was doing that day. I said just work stuff, errands. He nodded and scrolled through his phone. I watched his face the whole time. He never flinched. Never looked guilty. Just sat there eating my eggs, drinking my coffee in my kitchen in my house. That was the moment I understood something about Daniel James Holloway that I had missed for 14 years. He was very, very good at lying, which meant I needed to be better. That same day on my lunch break, I drove to a branch of BB&T Bank on South Boulevard, not our regular branch, a different one. I opened a personal checking account in my name only. Rachel Marie Holloway. Just mine. I deposited $200 cash that I had in my wallet. The account number started with 4471. I know that number by heart because I stared at it every day for the next 6 weeks. Every week after that, I moved money. Small amounts. Nothing that would show up strange. $300 here. $500 there. When I sold some old jewelry on Facebook Marketplace, $840 that went straight into 4471. I also called a lawyer. Her name was Patricia Webb. Family law attorney. Office on East Moorhead Street, 3rd floor, gray building with a blue awning. I found her on Google, read every single review, and called her on a Wednesday afternoon from the parking lot of the Publix on Pineville Matthews Road. She had a calm voice. Direct. No drama. She told me, do not confront him yet. Do not move out. Do not tell anyone. Document everything first. So that's what I did. Over the next 6 weeks, I took photos of the hotel receipt. I photographed the birthday card. I wrote down dates, times, anything I noticed. Daniel coming home at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday saying he had a work dinner. The perfume smell on his jacket that was not mine, it was lighter, floral. Karen always wore that kind. I also noticed something else during those 6 weeks. Karen stopped coming to Sunday dinner. First week, she had a headache. Second week, she had plans. Third week, she just didn't answer my text. My own sister. Not answering my text. I sat with that pain privately. At night, after Daniel fell asleep, I would lie there in the dark and feel the full weight of it. Not just a husband. A sister, too. 2 people at my table every holiday. 2 people I would have called if something terrible happened. Both of them. Gone to the same place. But I didn't cry where anyone could see me. Trisha Webb told me, "Stay steady, Rachel. Stay steady." So I did. And then on a Saturday morning in late March, everything changed again. Daniel sat down across from me at the kitchen table with his hands folded in front of him. And he said, "Rachel, I think we need to talk." He had rehearsed it. I could tell. The way he sat down too carefully. The way his hands were folded on the table like he was about to present something at a business meeting. Daniel was a sales guy. He knew how to deliver a message. He'd practiced this. I sat across from him with my coffee mug, both hands wrapped around it. I kept my face completely still. He said, "Rachel, I haven't been happy for a long time." I didn't say anything. He said, "I think somewhere along the way we grew apart. I think we both know that." I still didn't say anything. He said, "I've been seeing someone. It's serious." "I'm sorry." That was it. No name. No details. Just, "I've been seeing someone." He couldn't even say her name to my face. I looked at him for a long moment. Kitchen was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming. Outside, a neighbor's dog was barking twice, then stopping. I said, "How long?" He said, "About 6 months." 6 months. So it started in August. Not October like I thought. August. I said, "Is it Karen?" The color left his face so fast it was like watching someone turn off a light. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Then he said, "Rachel, I said, "Yes or no, Daniel?" He looked down at the table. He said, "Yes." I nodded. I took a sip of my coffee. I set the mug down carefully on the coaster. The blue ceramic coaster I bought at a craft fair in Asheville 3 years ago. And I said, "Okay. I want you out of this house by Friday." He looked up. He said, "Rachel, we should talk about this. We should go to counseling. We should." I said, "Daniel, I have been to see Patricia Webb on East Moorhead Street. I have documentation going back to October 14th. The Marriott on Tryon Street. $189 for one night. I also have Karen's birthday card. Pink envelope. Every word of it." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard in my life. He said, "You knew?" I said, "I've known since Valentine's Day." That was 6 weeks he had sat at my table, slept in my bed, eaten my food. For 6 weeks while I was quietly building my exit, he thought he was fooling me. The look on his face in that moment, I will never forget it as long as I live. He moved out by Thursday. One day early. He took his clothes, his golf clubs, his coffee maker, the expensive one he got for Christmas, and the gray suit jacket. He did not take the shoebox. He must have panicked and forgotten it. I put the shoebox in a bag and dropped it in the trash outside. I did not call Karen. She called me 3 days later. On a Tuesday evening at 6:23 p.m., I watched her name light up my phone screen. I let it ring. All 7 times. 'Cause Patricia Webb and I had a meeting the next morning. And I needed to focus. Trisha Webb's office smelled like fresh coffee and old books. She had a big oak desk, 2 windows facing East Moorhead Street, and a framed quote on the wall behind her that said, "Prepare, then proceed." I liked her immediately the first time I walked in. She was maybe 55, silver hair pulled back, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She reminded me of a woman who had seen everything and was surprised by nothing. That Wednesday morning she laid out everything on her desk. North Carolina is an equitable distribution state. That means marital assets get divided fairly, not always 50-50, but fairly. We had been married 14 years. I had worked the entire time. I had contributed to every mortgage payment, every utility bill, every vacation, every car note. The house on Willow Creek Drive was worth $347,000. We had a joint savings account with $61,400 in it. Daniel had a 401k with his company worth approximately $89,000. Trisha slid a yellow legal pad across the desk and said, "Write down everything you want, Rachel. Everything. Don't edit yourself. Just write." So I did. I wrote for 11 minutes straight. When I was done, Patricia read it, nodded slowly, and said, "This is very reasonable. We can get you this." The divorce took 4 months and 12 days. Daniel hired a lawyer too, a younger guy named Brett something, office in Valentine. He pushed back on a few things. Tried to argue the savings account. Tried to say the house should be sold and split. Trisha Webb ate him alive. Quietly, professionally, completely. In the end, I kept the house on Willow Creek Drive. I kept $38,000 from the joint savings. I received a portion of Daniel's 401k, $31,500. And Daniel paid my legal fees. Total, the divorce settlement gave me $69,500 plus the house. I sat in Patricia's office the day the papers were signed and I cried for the first time since Valentine's Day morning. Not because I was sad about Daniel, but because it was finally over. 'Cause I had held myself together for 4 months and 17 days and now I could finally put it down. Trisha handed me a box of tissues and said, "You did good, Rachel. You did real good." I drove home to Willow Creek Drive. I unlocked my front door, my door now, just mine. I walked to the kitchen. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea. I sat at the table where Daniel had delivered his rehearsed confession. And I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Quiet. Good quiet. But here is where the story takes a turn. Because while I was rebuilding my life slowly and quietly, Daniel and Karen were doing what people who blow up a family always do. They were acting like everything was fine. And I'll get to what happened to them. But first, right around this time, something happened to me that I did not expect at all. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, my boss called me into his office. Dr. Kenneth Abrams. Dentist. Practiced on Providence Road for 23 years. Quiet man, fair man, the kind of employer who remembered your birthday and left a card on your desk every year without fail. I had worked as his office manager for 11 years. I sat down across from his desk thinking, is something wrong? Did I make an error on the billing? Did a patient complain? He folded his hands and said, "Rachel, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm retiring." I blinked. I said, "Oh." He said, "My wife and I are moving to Sarasota, Florida. End of the year. And I've been thinking a lot about what happens to this practice." He slid a folder across the desk. He said, "I want to sell it to you." I stared at that folder for a full 5 seconds without moving. He said, "You know this practice better than anyone. You know the patients, the staff, the systems, the billing, everything. You've been running it practically by yourself for the last 4 years anyway." I opened the folder. The asking price was $180,000. For a fully operational dental practice with an established patient base of 847 active patients, 2 exam rooms, all equipment included, and a lease already in place on Providence Road. Trisha Webb always said, "Don't edit yourself. Just write down what you want." I thought about that folder all night. I sat at my kitchen table on Willow Creek Drive until 1:17 a.m. going through every number. The $69,500 from the divorce settlement. The $11,200 I had saved in account 4471. My credit score, 748. What a small business loan would look like. What the monthly payments would be. What the practice currently brought in. Dr. Abrams showed me the last 3 years of revenue. Average $340,000 per year. I called Patricia Webb the next morning. She referred me to a business attorney named Gavin Shore. I called First Bank on South Tryon Street and spoke to a loan officer named Michelle Tran. 6 weeks later I signed the papers. Rachel Marie Holloway, sole owner of Abrams Family Dental, Providence Road, Charlotte, North Carolina. I was 43 years old. I had lost my husband. Lost my sister. Lost the marriage I thought I had. And somehow, standing in that empty waiting room on a Friday afternoon in October with the keys in my hand, I felt more like myself than I had in years. Maybe more than I ever had. I repainted the waiting room. Soft gray walls, white trim. I bought new chairs, the comfortable kind, not the plastic ones. I put a small coffee station in the corner with a little sign that said, "Help yourself, you're among friends." I hired a new hygienist named Deborah who was 61 years old and had 30 years of experience and laughed at everything. Business grew. By the end of my first full year, revenue was up $47,000 from the previous year. I was sleeping well, cooking real meals, taking walks in the evening around the neighborhood. My life, my actual life, was getting good. And then one afternoon in November my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the voice I knew immediately. It was my mother. And she was crying. My mother's name is Sandra Elaine Cooper. She is 67 years old. She lives in the same house in Mooresville where Karen and I grew up. White shutters, blue front door, rose bushes along the left side of the porch that she has tended every spring for 31 years. She called me from her neighbor Judy's phone because she said she dropped hers in the kitchen sink 2 days earlier and hadn't replaced it yet. That was Mama. Always something. I said, "Mama, what's wrong?" She said, "Rachel, I need to tell you something. And I need you to let me finish before you say anything." I sat down on my couch. I pulled my knees up. I said, "Okay." She was quiet for a moment. I could hear her breathing. Then she said, "I knew about Daniel and Karen before you did." The room went very still. She said, "Karen told me last summer. July. She called me crying saying she had feelings for Daniel and she didn't know what to do. I told her to stop it immediately. I told her it was wrong. She said she would. I didn't say anything. Mama kept going. She said, then in September she called me again. She said it had already happened. That they were already, she paused, already together. I told her she had to tell you. She said she would handle it. She said she needed time. I said, "Mama." That was September. He didn't tell me until March. She said, "I know, baby. I know." 6 months. My mother had known for 6 months while I sat at holiday tables and Sunday dinners not knowing a single thing. I said, "Why are you telling me this now?" She was quiet again. Then she said, "Because Karen called me last week. She and Daniel are having problems. Serious problems. And she wanted me to." She stopped herself. I said, "She wanted you to what, Mama?" Mama said, "She wanted me to talk to you. To soften you up. So that when she reaches out you'd be willing to listen." The nerve. The absolute nerve. I stood up off my couch. I walked to my kitchen window. Outside the neighbor's oak tree was bare, November branches against a gray sky. I said, "Mama, I love you. And I forgive you for not telling me sooner because I know you were in an impossible position. But I need you to call Karen back and tell her one thing." Mama said, "What's that?" I said, "Tell her I said good luck." Mama was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Rachel, I am so proud of who you have become." I held the phone for a second after she said that. Pressed it a little tighter to my ear. Then I said, "I love you, Mama. Get yourself a new phone." She laughed. First time I'd heard her laugh in months. After I hung up, I stood in my kitchen for a while just breathing. So Karen and Daniel were having problems. I won't pretend I felt nothing when I heard that. I'm human. There was a small, quiet part of me that felt something. But it wasn't satisfaction. Not yet. Because I didn't know the full story yet. And what was actually happening with Daniel and Karen, I'll get to that in just a moment. But first, if you've been with me this whole time, drop it in the comments right now. And tell me, did you see any of this coming? 'Cause the next part I promise you nobody saw coming. I found out what was really happening with Daniel and Karen the way you find out most things in a small town. Through somebody who wasn't supposed to tell me. Her name was Brenda Hutchins. She worked at the nail salon on Brawley School Road, Lux Nails, the one with the pink sign and the little fountain in the corner. I'd been going there for 6 years. Brenda did my nails every 3 weeks without fail. Gel, medium length, always a neutral color. Usually something called bare necessity or soft cashmere. I was sitting in her chair on a Tuesday afternoon in late November when she leaned in close and said, "Rachel, I don't know if I should say this." I looked at her in the mirror. I said, "Brenda, say it." She said, "I did Karen's nails last week." I said, "Okay." She said she came in alone. No ring on her finger. I noticed because last time she came in back in August she had this big square diamond on her left hand. She showed everybody. Said Daniel proposed. I felt something move through my chest. I said, "He proposed to her?" Brenda nodded slowly. She said, "Big ring." She was showing it off to every single person in this salon. Talking about the wedding. Said they were getting married in the spring. I stared at my own reflection in the mirror for a moment. Daniel had proposed to my sister. With what I could only assume was a ring bought with money from the joint account we hadn't fully settled yet at that point. Brenda kept going. She said, "But last week she came in and the ring was gone. She looked terrible, Rachel. I mean terrible. Red eyes. Tired. She asked me not to say anything but she looked at me. I thought you should know." I said, "What happened to the ring, Brenda?" She said, "From what I could piece together, Daniel lost his job." I set my hands flat on the armrest. Brenda said, "His company did layoffs in October. Big ones. 30% of the sales team. Daniel was one of them. And apparently without his income things got very bad very fast. Karen had quit her job at the real estate office back in the summer. She thought they'd be fine on his salary. So there they were. No income. No savings. Karen had given up her apartment when she moved in with Daniel. They were renting a place on the east side of Charlotte, $1,850 a month. Brenda said, "I heard they're 2 months behind on rent." I looked down at my hands. Soft cashmere on my nails. My nail. My hands. My Tuesday afternoon. My life that I had rebuilt from nothing on my own. And I felt something I want to be honest about. It wasn't joy exactly. It was more like clarity. Like watching a math equation finally balance itself out on the board. Every action. Every choice. Every lie told at my kitchen table while eating my food and drinking my coffee. It was all balancing out. On its own. Without me doing a single thing. I tipped Brenda $40 that day. More than I ever had before. She deserved it. But here's the part that really got me. Here's the part that kept me up that night staring at the ceiling. Daniel didn't just lose his job. The reason he lost his job, I'll get to that. I found out the full story 6 days later. From the last person I ever expected to hear it from. His name was Marcus Webb. No relation to Patricia Webb, my attorney. Marcus was Daniel's coworker for 9 years. They had started at Carolina's Medical Supply together back in 2013. Marcus was the best man at our wedding. He sat in the front row on Daniel's side in a navy blue suit and cracked jokes during the reception that made my grandmother laugh so hard she spilled her sweet tea. After the divorce, Marcus had gone quiet. I understood. He was Daniel's friend first. I didn't hold it against him. But on a Sunday evening in early December, Marcus Webb showed up at my front door on Willow Creek Drive. He was holding a casserole dish covered in aluminum foil. He said, "My wife Cheryl made you a chicken casserole. She said to tell you she's been thinking about you." I stood in the doorway for a second. Then I stepped back and said, "Come in, Marcus." We sat at my kitchen table. I made coffee. He kept his coat on for the first few minutes like he wasn't sure he was staying. Then he said, "Rachel, I need to tell you something about what happened with Daniel's job." Because you're going to hear a version of it eventually, and I'd rather you hear the truth. I wrapped my hands around my coffee mug. I said, okay. He said, Daniel wasn't laid off. I looked up. Marcus said, the company did do layoffs in October. That part is true. But Daniel was not on the layoff list. Daniel was fired 2 weeks before the layoffs. For a completely separate reason. I said, what reason? Marcus looked at the table for a moment. Then he looked at me. He said, he was expensing personal trips on his company card. Hotels, dinners, gas. He'd been doing it for over a year. The accounting department caught it during a quarterly audit in September. They investigated for 3 weeks. When they confronted him, he tried to blame it on a clerical error. I said, how much? Marcus said, $11,400. I sat very still. $11,400 in falsified expenses. Over a year. Which meant he had been doing it while we were still married. Which meant some of those hotel charges, some of those dinners were Karen charged to his company card. While he was supposed to be on work trips. The Marriott on Tryon Street. October 14th, $189. I wonder now if that was one of them. Marcus said they gave him a choice. Repay the full amount and resign quietly, or they involve law enforcement. He repaid it. Wiped out most of what he had left in his personal account. I said, does Karen know the real reason? Marcus said, she knows now. That's apparently what started the problems between them. She found out he'd lied to her about being laid off. Took her 2 months to get the truth. I thought about that for a moment. Daniel had lied to Karen the same way he had lied to me. Same man. Same habits. Different woman sitting across the table not knowing. There is something almost mathematical about people like Daniel. They don't change the behavior. They just change the audience. Marcus finished his coffee. He stood up. He put his coat on properly this time. He said, Rachel, for what it's worth, I should have said something sooner. About a lot of things. Cheryl and I both feel terrible. I walked him to the door. I said, Marcus, you brought a chicken casserole on a Sunday evening. That counts for something. He nodded. Shook his head slowly like he was still processing all of it. Then he walked to his car and drove away down Willow Creek Drive. I closed the door. I stood in my hallway for a long moment. Then I walked to the kitchen, cut myself a piece of that chicken casserole and sat down at my table. It was the best thing I had eaten in months. She called me on a Thursday morning. December 19th, 6 days before Christmas. I was at the practice on Providence Road. Sitting at my desk going through insurance billing for November. Cup of coffee on my left, a stack of folders on my right, Deborah laughing about something in the hallway with a patient. My phone lit up on the desk. Karen Cooper. I had never changed her contact name back. Till said Karen Cooper, her maiden name, our shared name. The name we grew up with together in that white house with the blue front door in Mooresville. I looked at it for 3 full rings. Then I picked it up. I said, Karen. She said, Rachel. Her voice was small. Smaller than I had ever heard it. Karen had always had a big voice. Confident. Filling whatever room she walked into. This voice was something else entirely. She said, can we talk? I leaned back in my chair. I looked at the ceiling of my office, the office of my practice, my business, my building that I had signed for with my own name and my own credit and my own 11 years of work. I said, I'm listening. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I don't even know where to start, Rachel. I said, the beginning is usually good. She made a sound. Half laugh, half something sadder. She said, I am so sorry. I know that's not enough. I know nothing I say is going to be enough. But I need you to know that I am sorry every single day. Every morning I wake up and the first thing I feel is what I did to my sister. I didn't say anything. She kept going. She said, I told myself so many lies. I told myself you two were already falling apart. I told myself it would have happened anyway. I told myself. She stopped. She said, I told myself a lot of things that weren't true. 'Cause the truth was too ugly to look at directly. I said, and what is the truth, Karen? She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, the truth is I was jealous of you my whole life, Rachel. You were always the stable one. The responsible one. The one Mama trusted. The one who had the house and the marriage and the life that looked right. And instead of being happy for you, she stopped again. I waited. She said, I wanted what you had. And when Daniel started paying attention to me, I told myself I deserved it. I told myself it was my turn. The office was quiet around me. I could hear the faint sound of the dental chair in exam room 2. Deborah's voice gentle and calm. I thought about what to say for a long time. Then I said, Karen, I have one question for you. Just one. She said, okay. I said, are you calling me because you're sorry? Or are you calling me because things with Daniel are falling apart and you need somewhere to land? The silence that followed lasted 11 seconds. I counted. Then she said both. And I know that's not fair. I appreciated the honesty more than she probably knew. I said, I'm not ready to talk more than this right now. But I heard you. Okay? I heard you. She said, okay. Thank you, Rachel. That's more than I deserve. I said, yeah. It is. And I hung up. I sat at my desk for a few minutes after that, just breathing. Looking at the stack of insurance folders. Coffee going cold on my left side. Then Deborah knocked on my open door and said, Mrs. Holloway, your 10 o'clock is here. And I stood up. Smoothed my blazer. Picked up my folder. And I went back to work. 'Cause that's what I do now. I go back to work. January came cold and sharp to Charlotte that year. The kind of cold that gets into your bones before you even open the front door. Frost on the windshields every morning. The oak tree in my neighbor's yard completely bare against a white sky. I had Christmas with Mama in Mooresville. Just the two of us. She made her cornbread dressing and sweet potato pie. We watched old movies on her couch under the same quilt she'd had since 1987. We didn't talk about Karen or Daniel once. It was the best Christmas I'd had in years. I came back to Charlotte on December 27th feeling lighter than I had in a long time. And then on January 8th, a Tuesday morning at 9:47 a.m., Patricia Webb called me. Not about legal business. We were done with legal business. She called me the way you call someone when you have news. She said, Rachel, I'm going to tell you something and I want you to just listen. I said, okay, Patricia. She said, I had a new client come in yesterday. Can't share details, obviously. But I want you to know that sometimes this job reminds me exactly why I do it. I said, what do you mean? She paused just 1 second. Then she said, let's just say that the universe has a very good filing system. Everything gets processed eventually. Just sometimes on a delay. I understood exactly what she was telling me without telling me. Daniel had walked into Patricia Webb's office. Daniel James Holloway had sat down across from the same oak desk, in the same office on East Moorhead Street, under the same framed quote, prepare then proceed, where I had sat 14 months earlier. Except this time he wasn't on my side of things. I held the phone quietly for a moment. Then I said, Patricia, how's your coffee this morning? She laughed. She said, excellent actually. I just made a fresh pot. I said, good. You deserve it. After I hung up, I stood at my kitchen window for a long time. Outside on Willow Creek Drive, a woman was walking her golden retriever. The dog was pulling ahead on the leash, nose down, tail up, completely joyful about being alive on a cold Tuesday morning. I thought about Valentine's Day 14 months ago. The blue robe. Cold eggs. Kitchen floor. 47 minutes of silence before I stood up and decided to plan instead of react. I thought about account number 4471. Patricia Webb's calm voice. Michelle Tran at First Bank. Dr. Abrams sliding that folder across his desk. I thought about Deborah laughing in the hallway. 847 active patients. Soft cashmere on my nails every 3 weeks. I thought about Mama's quilt and her sweet potato pie and the best Christmas I'd had in years. And then I thought about Daniel sitting in that gray chair across from Patricia Webb. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel satisfied exactly either. I felt something quieter than that. Cleaner. I felt like the math had finally finished working itself out. Every lie Daniel told. Every morning he sat at my table pretending. Every month Karen didn't answer my texts. Every choice they made thinking there would be no consequence. The universe had taken 14 months. But it had gotten there. On its own. Without me doing a single thing except building my own life back up from the ground. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee. I put on my blazer. I drove to Providence Road. I unlocked the door of Abrams Family Dental, my practice, my name on the door, my 11 years becoming something real and permanent and mine. Deborah was already there. She had the coffee station going. The little sign in the corner said, "Help yourself, you're among friends." She looked up when I walked in and said, "Good morning, Mrs. Holloway." I smiled at her. A real one. Kind that starts somewhere deep and works its way out. I said, "Good morning, Deborah. Let's have a good day." And we did. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you. Rachel didn't plot revenge. She didn't make phone calls trying to burn Daniel's life down. She didn't chase Karen down demanding apologies. She just got quiet. Got organized. Got to work. And life in its own time, in its own way, did the rest. That's what honor looks like. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just steady. Dignified. Unbreakable. If this story moved you, if you felt Rachel's pain or her strength or that quiet satisfaction at the end, share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you are new here, welcome to Honor Unveiled. This is where real stories live. Stories about women who got knocked down and came back standing taller than ever. Hit that subscribe button. 'Cause we have so many more stories to tell. And every single one of them ends the same way. With honor.